I absolutely love living in Florida. I'm in Sarasota, Florida. But if you're not from here or if you haven't lived here ever, I just want to talk about 12 things that you should know about. Some of the things you probably do already, some things you probably don't. Over the last 3 years, we had a major real estate sales, and a lot of people came from New York and California and other states when we had the lockdown. Well, we didn't have one, everyone else did. And I kind of saw this frenzy happen, and a lot of people did things that they probably regretted in the moment, or they might regret in the future if prices come down quite a bit. But that was the market, and some people just needed to buy a house, and some people made out really well. Like, for example, there was multiple offer scenarios. And when I say multiple offer, I mean you list the property and then just a couple days later, literally two, you're at 39 offers on that property. So people had to offer over asking, and people were waiving their inspection contingencies. There was a whole bunch of stuff that maybe wasn't the smartest thing to do, but that was the nature of the market. That's what you have to do to get a house. So let's talk about the 12 things you should really know about if you're considering moving. We're no longer in a frenzy. We're just in a normal equilibrium market. It's really nice right now. And by the way, I am at Philippi Estate Park in Sarasota. This is on the Philippi Creek. Beautiful place. It's a 60-acre park. You can come fishing here. There's a dog park. Or you could just come out on the pier like I am right now and look out at all the kayakers, boats, and jet skis.
Well, it's a little overcast today, but here's a nice little view from the pier.
So I'm going to count down from 12 to number one being the most important thing that you should know about. And I especially find point number 8, point number 3, and point number 1 particularly interesting. So let's get started here. Okay, number 12 is the surprise about the age and of the demographics, in the area. So a lot of people think that, Florida, this is where everyone who's really old lives. And, everywhere you go in the nation, you're going to have old folks and retirees. And indeed, there's quite a few retirees people that come here and retire to Florida. Let's look at this graph here, which shows the actual statistics of the age group. So as we go into here, first of all, you will see that over 85% is only 2.82% of the population. But if we're going into retirement age, which is 65 or older, let's add all this up, and we have about 22%. So only 22%, 1 out of 5 people out there are in retirement age. But then the next group here are people between 45 and 65, and this accounts to another 25% of people, of the population. So yes, indeed, over 45 years old is about half of the population, and I fall into that category. So I wouldn't say I feel really, really young here. I'm 45 years old. I just feel like a normal person living in a normal place. But minors account to about 19% of the entire population. So that actually is quite a few people. 19% of the population, 1 out of 5, once again, is quite a bit, So if you're a family and you're thinking about coming down to Florida, listen, there are plenty of families here. Okay, number 11 is crime. You should know about the crime in Florida. And when we look up the statistics, we basically find that Florida is neither safe nor dangerous. It is exactly in the middle of all the states when you put them on a list from the number of crimes per capita. But you have to zoom out a little bit. Florida is in the U.S., but the U.S. is in North America and in the world, and in general, we're in a very, very safe place. This is a very safe place to come and move to, especially if you're coming from a different country. I've lived here since 1992, and I have never had a situation with crime. It is so rare to hear about violent crimes, and yeah, petty theft and things like that happen, right? But in general, I always feel safe, and yeah, I lock my doors, but a lot of people don't. But if you live in a gated community, then you are extra safe, because your home, someone has to get through a guard gate. There's usually a lot of cameras around, and that's not just homeowners, but it's also condos, gated condo communities. So really, it's a pretty safe place. And listen, these condo communities and homeowners associations are everywhere here. So I do think that it's a very, very safe place to live. Okay, number 10 is Chinese drywall. And this used to be a conversation we had quite a bit amongst real estate agents and buyers and sellers. But you're not hearing it as much anymore. We've had a lot of clarity come out from it. But here's the bottom line. When it comes to drywall, there was a period from 2001 to 2008 where the drywall was sourced from China. And what happened is, unfortunately, they produce it a little bit differently than we do. And we had a shortage because I think there was 7 or 8 hurricanes that hit within a 1.5 year span in Florida and just the general southeast of the United States. And what ended up happening was that we didn't have enough drywall to repair everything, so we started importing some from China. Well, this ended up being an environmental health issue. Unfortunately, about 100,000 homes were affected by this. So it appears that about 20 states were affected by this, Florida being one of them. In fact, it was one of the bigger ones because we had so many hurricanes during that time frame. And if you're wondering what Chinese drywall does, it's the following. It is totally something that can be remedied. That's the good news. And basically that means removing the drywall and replacing and re-drywalling the property. So in a nutshell, the hydrogen sulfide comes out of the drywall and it causes copper pipes to corrode much quicker than they would in their natural environment. And this happens especially in humid climates, which Florida is a very humid place. So your copper pipes, if you have an older home for your water supply, are greatly affected, which could cause water leaks. But more so, the problem is in the air conditioning units, because the air conditioning units circulate all the air, whereas the pipes are behind the wall, so there's no movement of air directly onto them. But the coils in the air conditioning system have a constant flow of the air from within to go on them, and it's being pushed by a fan. So the air conditioning units tend to corrode much faster than they would under regular drywall conditions, which basically means that your air conditioning system needs to be replaced much sooner, or at least the coils within it. Now, when it comes to respiratory problems, yes, there are problems as well. The health effects are respiratory irritation, headaches, sinusitis, eye irritation, throat irritation, and so on. So if you have a home that was either built during 2001 to 2008 or had a major remodel work done from hurricane damages especially, well then I would just recommend you go and replace your drywall. It is not such a costly expense depending on the size of your home, but it will run you in the thousands of dollars. The 9th thing that I think it's critical for you to be aware of are the pests. And it's not just the bugs, although let's start there. With the bugs, we have a warm climate here. It is very humid. Especially during the summer, you'll see a lot more bugs. And if you're from the Northeast, there's a lot more bugs here than there are up there. Now, those are just the insects that I'm talking about. And indeed, if you don't do pest control in Florida, you might run into some insect problems. So I highly recommend you have a service, or you just keep your place super clean. The next pest is snakes. You know, we have snakes. We have poisonous snakes, we have non-poisonous snakes. I don't know if I've ever seen a poisonous snake, and I've lived here since 1992. I have seen lots of snakes. I've had them come into my house, my garage, all types of places, and I've run into them just, taking walks like this or riding bicycles. So snakes are a thing. And another thing is raccoons. This is definitely a critter, and rats and mice as well. Whenever you have fruit trees on your property, so if you have a mango tree, which I love mangoes, or if you have some sort of citrus, which is very common in Florida, they grow very well, you're probably going to start attracting some raccoons and some rats, because they love eating that stuff. And you basically have to pick up all of the fallen fruit, which is, nothing anyone really wants to do. And then aside from that, it gets a little bit bigger. After that, we have obviously alligators, and we do have crocodiles as well, but mostly alligators. So depending on where you go, the more inland you go, the more you see them. They tend to stay in fresh water as opposed to salt water, which is on the coastline. And now that we're talking about water, what about sharks? What about stingrays? There are obviously predators out there, but when you live in a city, that's not really present. You don't see it too much. You will see alligators in a city, usually in lakes, but honestly, they're more afraid of you than you are of them, and you are usually afraid of them. So it's not something that really causes too much of a threat, as long as you stay smart and you keep your dog on a leash and your children, far away from banks of lakes. Also, let's not forget that we have bobcats and we have the Florida panther. Bobcats I have seen, but it's very, very rare. And I'm in Sarasota, Florida, and I've seen them. Actually, I saw one a couple of months ago. I saw two a couple of months ago crossing the road at like 3 a.m., crossing an intersection. And I've never seen a Florida panther. I think the panthers have kind of been, gathered up and put in a location for their habitat. Okay, number 8, this is a little longer topic. It's our Homeowners Association dues. You should really be aware of this. And it's not just homeowners, it's also condos. So when I'll be referencing homeowners dues, I'll be talking about condos and homes. So basically, these condos and homes that we sell here are in gated communities many times. And those gated communities have a rule book, basically, and part of that is collecting fees for the security, for the private roads, for the guard gate, for the community pool, and so on. And these fees never go down. They only go up. Let me tell you, once again, they never go down. They only go up. Do they go up significantly? And up until like a year ago, I was gonna say, no, they go up insignificantly. If your homeowner's monthly dues was $200, they might go up to $210, just 5% increase. But now that we had a new law change about 1.5 years, 2 years ago, the effects of that law have started to change for condos specifically. Now I'm talking about high-rise condos, and this is defined as 3 stories or higher. What has changed is the following. If you're in a condo that's 3 stories or higher, they're now required to do 2 things. One is a feasibility study for the reserves. So it's a reserve feasibility study. They basically make sure that there's enough reserves to cover the cost of everything that is part of the community. That's a shared expense. Sometimes that's just the clubhouse, sometimes it's the roof of all the properties. It really depends. And the other thing is a milestone inspection. This is a structural inspection that used to never be done, and homeowners fees or condo fees that fall under the rules, they basically never had saved the money for that. So condo fees recently started going up a lot more, especially in the beachfront areas, especially right by the coastline. Sometimes it's not beach, sometimes it's just a nice big lagoon or something. But if you're 3 stories or higher, there's a 0 chance that your fees have not gone up significantly. I would say at least 25% in the last year, maybe 2 years. Now, will they keep going up? I'm pretty sure the answer is yes, but not as significant as they did recently. This law is not going to change. It's not going to go away. We're going to need to do structural inspections every 10 years on high-rise condos. So there's an expense associated with that, all the repairs that go with that. So I do think that we're going to have higher fees, and then after things kind of come to an equilibrium, the increases are going to be much more manageable. Okay, number 7 is the traffic. So we have had quite a population increase. This last 3 years, there's been a lot of people leaving New York and California and many other states and coming to Florida and to Texas as well. Florida has a 1.9% population growth. So out of everyone dying and everyone coming and everyone leaving, 1.9% on the upside per year. That is the current statistics. They say that it's about 1,218 people per day that move to Florida. And whether people are moving or not doesn't really matter as much. What really matters is the life that you experience, and you're going to have more traffic. That's really what happens. It's going to take a little bit longer to get on the interstate, a little bit more traffic jams when there's an accident. It's going to take you a little bit longer to get onto the beach, unless you're, of course, living already beachfront with those condo dues. But there is some good news about the traffic, and that is what I experienced firsthand this last Christmas season. So December 2023, I went out Christmas shopping quite a few times into the big shopping plazas like UTC and the Ellington Outlet Mall. What I experienced, I have never experienced before. there was no one out there. Well, very few. Compared to every other year that I've lived here, there were so few people shopping in physical brick and mortar stores. I guess that's the good news. That is changing. So we'll see how that works out, but I'm pretty sure Amazon's just going to get more people's business and there's going to be less stores out there. For example, Sarasota Square Mall is pretty much a ghost town at this point, and it used to be the place to go. Number 6 are sinkholes and natural disasters and so on. But really, let's talk about sinkholes, because this is a topic that is not really covered by people. So we do have sinkholes, and why do sinkholes happen? It's basically about the water level. During dry season, the water level goes down in the aquifer, which is, the caves underneath Florida, because we're made out of limestone. And eventually, just through gravity and water levels going too low, there's a sinkhole that happens somewhere. But it's not anywhere in Florida, because 75% of all sinkholes that happen in Florida happen in 3 counties. So pay attention if you're thinking about moving to these counties: Pasco, Hernando, and Hillsborough County. These are just a little bit north of where I live in Sarasota. Just going over the Sunshine Skyway Bridge, and you're up on the other side. And it's basically, if you're looking at the map of Florida, in fact, just look at this picture right here. This picture here shows you where the sinkholes are reported, and as you can tell, they're reported everywhere. But obviously, the majority of sinkholes are happening in this one particular area. Now, I'm not sure if insurance covers sinkholes. A lot of times there's an exclusion for them, but you can always buy insurance for anything you want. So just a little bit of money or a lot of money, and you got that covered. Number 5, let's talk about mold. So due to our high humidity, mold could be a concern, but not all mold is bad. Mold is not always toxic, but we do have some toxic mold as well, most specifically known as black mold. That's the worst one. And this just happens when there's a perfect environment for mold to grow, which is no air circulation, some sort of water source, and stagnant air. Okay, when you have just everything put together, and the right temperature, of course, so the humidity levels and so on, well, yeah, you can end up having some mold growth. And can you fix it? Absolutely. The worst case scenario is you rip out a little bit of drywall or a lot of drywall, and you start coating studs and so on, and really protect yourself so this doesn't happen again, and obviously fixing the source of the leak. I do recommend, as a real estate agent, I recommend that when you're doing your inspections, that you also do a mold inspection. And there's a couple types, but there's spot mold inspections, and then also general air mold inspections. So if you're worried about something specific that you see, you can have like a little swab done, and they send it off to the lab and tell you if it's a toxic mold or not. Or if you just think that generally the house smells a little off or something, and you think that there's some mold in the house, what they do is they run the air inside, compare it to the air outside, just the general conditions, and then they do a comparison, send it off to the lab, and they tell you exactly if you have mold or not, and if it's toxic or not. Now, this part of the inspection costs quite a bit of money, especially if you're buying an entry-level home. So a lot of people don't do it because you can start inspecting yourself to bankruptcy. Regular home inspections are going to cost you $500. Then you do your 4-point enwindment, which you need for insurance purposes on older homes. You're adding another $200, $250 there. Then you have a septic tank. Then you have a pool. These are all add-ons. So this whole a la carte home inspection business can get pretty costly, and home inspectors can easily take over $1,000 for just a regular starter home. But I'm talking about mold because mold is definitely something that can become a problem, and you do not want it to be a problem. If you discover that you have mold in your house, a lot of insurance companies are going to say, whoa, 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 we don't want to pay out on this stuff, and they're going to fight to not pay out. So if you have your inspection prior to purchasing, and you have a lot of data and evidence of what's happening and why you have to have that remedied, there's probably a much better chance you're going to win in the court with the insurance company. Now let's talk about number 4, red tide. Have you ever heard of red tide anywhere other than Florida? Chances are not really, because we are the main victim of red tide. If you've ever visited Florida and you see warnings about red tide being present, you know, what I recommend is you go online and you check out Mote Marine Laboratory. They do a lot of checks. I think it's mote.org, M-O-T-E. They do a lot of specimen samples to see what is present in the water all around Florida. They're actually located here in Sarasota. And can you die from it? Absolutely not, as far as I know. But with some people who are sensitive to the element, they might have some skin irritation or some burning eyes or respiratory irritation. For the first time in 30 years, last year it happened to me, where I had a hard time breathing, and I just had to keep coughing whenever red tide was near and I was close to the beach. Now, are you going to be affected by red tide if you're 4 or 5 miles out and you're just, let's just say, east of the interstate in Lakewood Ranch? Probably not. No, you're probably going to be only affected when you're actually going to the beach and you're really, really close. I have an Airbnb that is really close to the waterway. It's not on the key, but it's just off the key. And we've had a few people report that they have a hard time breathing when it's red tide. Look it up and read about it, because this is definitely something you should know about. Okay, number 3, this is one that we need to dig a little deep on. This is insurance costs, and it's not just home insurance. I will say that car insurance has also gone up. But in a nutshell, it's like this. Insurance had a lot of scams recently. A lot of people took advantage of insurance companies. Oh, boo-hoo-hoo to all those insurance companies. I know. Listen, it doesn't matter. They're a business, and they got scammed, okay? I feel bad. But what happened? There was a lot of roofing claims, and then there was legit claims when hurricanes came, when Hurricane Ian came, and then there was a lot of false claims. Door knockers knocked on doors and said, oh, you have a roof problem. Did you know that there was a big storm? It wasn't a named storm, but there was a storm, and most likely, you know, your 22-year-old roof lost some shingles because of it. And unfortunately, instead of just fighting it in court, a lot of insurance companies decided to pay out and save the attorney fees, because when they lose, they have to pay for both attorney fees. So they just started settling claims. Well, this got a little bit out of control, where there was a new law passed that is door knocking for roofers is no longer allowed, but they still get you in different ways. The scam is still going, and more laws are changing so that this doesn't happen anymore. But then there was Hurricane Ian and Hurricane Nicole, and we had a lot of other named storms that caused damage. So what does this really do for insurance? Well, it's like this. If they got to pay out more than they make, they're going to raise your rates, okay? But it gets even worse than that. A lot of insurance companies went out of business. So rates went up because there was less competition and less people that will cover older homes, or homes with particular things like a flat roof or maybe cloth wiring. And then it got even worse, because insurance companies said, listen, there's only a few of us left. There's about a dozen companies or so in the state. So they said, we need to go and cover our bases so that we don't go insolvent like all these other companies did, and we stay in the business. So they started purchasing reinsurance. And reinsurance is insurance for the insurance companies, so that if a major storm or major event happens and a whole bunch of their policies get affected, like disproportionately, let's just say they're mostly in South Florida or in the Keys, and something hits in the Keys, that company might just go out of business and not pay anybody. So in order to prevent that, they started buying reinsurance, which means that they spread their risk with other companies. For example, Berkshire Hathaway. And inadvertently, what they did is they raised the price of insurance, of the insurance premium, to the buyer, because who's paying for that reinsurance? That's you, or not the buyer, the insured party. So you are the homeowner who has insurance, and you're paying for that. And then to make matters even worse, is we had Hurricane Ian that caused so much damage. Hurricane Ian happened in September 2022, and on the renewal period of January 2023, they went up 40%. And then in the renewal period in June 2023, they went up between 20 and 40% from the increased 40% already, which is why everyone's insurance went up so much, sometimes doubling and sometimes even tripling over a 1.5 year period. Now, I know sometimes it's really difficult to get insurance. If you have a property that you are not carrying insurance on and you want to get insurance, you may not be able to get it for 30 days, waiting, through the vesting period. And if there's a named storm in the Atlantic or the Gulf of Mexico, you're not going to be able to get insurance until that storm passes. So insurance costs in general, point number 3 is very important. Insurance is really getting expensive, and thankfully, Ron DeSantis, our governor, has proposed new legislation to really ease the cost, and we're expecting at least a 6% decline coming up soon. Now, I know that's nothing compared to the increases that we've had, but it's something compared to nothing. Okay, let's keep talking. Number 2, what do you need to be aware of? Well, the natural disasters. Let me talk about a few. Obviously, I was just talking about hurricanes, so that is probably our biggest threat. But along with hurricanes comes lots of rain, and that is flooding. And you think that your homeowner's insurance policy is going to cover a flood, and that is not always the case. In fact, many times it's not the case, that you need separate flood insurance. So that might not be covered. And flooding happens even just during rains. It doesn't have to be a hurricane, just really bad rains. So pay attention to how many lakes are in your area, because when they build new construction communities, they usually make some lakes around there, which are basically retention ponds. They're a place where the water to go. They're all hooked up through an underground tunnel system and then hooked up to pumps to pump that water out of there in case it starts getting flooded. Can you stop the water completely? No. But you can definitely help to mitigate the risk. Another natural disaster that we encounter are tornadoes. Now, it's not as bad as some other parts of the country, but yes, I have seen tornadoes. And my neighbors were affected by a small tornado a few years back where their pool cages just blew away, basically. And when these natural disasters happen, we don't really have high ground here in Florida. Some parts of Florida are a little higher than others, but in general, Florida is pretty flat. So you have nowhere to go but on your second floor on your house or on the roof. So there's really nowhere to climb up. When a flood happens, and it's a big flood, you're gonna have some problems. Now, I've lived here since 1992. I have never had flooding problems, knock on wood. Okay, now the last one, point number 1, and this one is surprising. At least to me, I thought I knew, and I didn't. Most people think that Florida is very Republican. Well, I have some statistics for you. Let's take a look at this chart right here. This breaks down the age groups, and it shows you where the ratios are, and we actually have quite a few Democratic voters. And just as predicted, as we get older, we tend to vote more Republican. And of course, as you know, I also went over the demographics, the age demographics, to show you that 45 and up is basically 50% of the population. So truly, is this a very Republican state? Not according to this statistic, but then there's how does it feel? And it kind of does feel like this is a Republican state. When I talk to clients, most of them are older than me. Me being 45, I fall into this group here where it's 38% Republican, 18% they don't lean any direction, and 44% Democratic. But when I talk to people, at least the ones that voice their opinion tend to be Republican. So once in a while you will see, some pickup truck with some flags on it, or you might see some bumper stickers, but you're going to see all types of bumper stickers. So you think that Florida is going to be this, redneck Republican place, and it's not at all. In fact, you don't feel that whatsoever. It might feel a little different if you're really involved in politics, which I'm not, so I can't speak on that behalf. But overall, I'm very happy living here. No one is breathing down my neck with their opinions or anything like that. Did I forget something on this list? Please write a comment below. I appreciate it. Ooh, this is very Florida-like. I really love this nature trail.